First contact. The metallic taste of recycled air filled Commander Jacob Winston's lungs as he stood on the bridge of the UE Brave, Earth's flagship diplomatic vessel. The ship's ambient hum did little to mask the tension that had descended upon the command deck. Before him, a holographic transmission flickered to life, revealing a figure that seemed to embody humanity's worst nightmares about alien life. General Kerr of the VNAC Dominion stood 7 feet tall, his hulking frame wrapped in bone-plated armor that seemed to grow naturally from his flesh. Red eyes burned with ancient hunger as he addressed Earth's assembled leaders, his voice a guttural growl that made the younger officers flinch involuntarily. Earthlings, Kerr sneered, the word dripping with disdain. You claim a place among the galaxy's civilized powers, yet your history is that of prey, not predators. The VNAC Dominion has no room for weaklings. Submit your planet and its resources, or face annihilation. Winston's jaw tightened, but his expression remained neutral. Around the room, his team, strategists, scientists, and military officers, exchanged uneasy glances. But Winston, a man with decades of service and the scars to prove it, stepped forward with the quiet confidence of someone who had faced extinction before. You've made your point, General, he said evenly, his voice cutting through the silence like steel on stone. But humanity doesn't bow to threats. We've faced extinction before, and every time we've endured. Kerr's laughter echoed through the command deck, a deep rumble that seemed to shake the very bulkheads. Endured? Survived? He leaned closer to the hologram, his predatory grin exposing rows of serrated teeth. Survival is not strength, human. War is the only measure of a species' worth, and your kind is untested in the wars of the stars. Winston held the alien's gaze unflinching. Perhaps it's time you learn what happens when you test humanity. The alien general's grin faltered for a moment, but his bravado held. Then meet us at the council station. There you may attempt to justify your arrogance. But know this, words will not save you when the VNAC march on your world. As the hologram dissolved, leaving only the quiet hum of the command deck, Major Adrian Wolfe stepped forward. The younger officer's face was taut with controlled anger. Commander, permission to speak freely? Winston nodded, clasping his hands behind his back. Why don't we just hit them now? We've got the fleet, and from what I've seen, they're not invincible. Winston shook his head. They're testing us, Adrian. Charging in without understanding our enemy is exactly what they want. The VNAC thrive on brute force, we need to outthink them. Wolfe frowned but said nothing further. Winston turned to Dr. Elias Harrington, the mission's chief historian. The older man adjusted his glasses, his thin frame dwarfed by the bulkier officers around him. Doctor, Winston said, how much of humanity's wartime history have you prepared? Everything, Commander, Harrington replied, his voice measured but firm. From the Punic Wars to modern conflicts. If the VNAC think they've seen war, they're in for an education. Good, Winston said. We're going to need more than firepower to win this. They see us as prey because they've never fought anything like us before. The room shifted into action as orders were issued and preparations began for the meeting at the neutral station. Winston turned to the viewport, staring out at the vast expanse of stars. He could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on him. This wasn't just about Earth, it was about humanity's place in the galaxy. The VNAC were a mirror of what humanity might have become if left unchecked, a race defined solely by conquest and domination. To them, diplomacy was weakness, and survival without overwhelming power was an insult. As the Brave's engines roared to life, Winston felt a flicker of doubt. Could humanity's bloody history, its centuries of war, sacrifice, and resilience, be enough to convince these alien predators of their mistake? Or would the lesson come too late, when blood was already spilling across the stars? Commander, Wolfe interrupted his thoughts, we've set course for the council station. Estimated arrival in 18 hours. Good, Winston replied, his voice steady. Make sure the team is ready. And Major. Yes, sir. Prepare for the worst. If words fail, we may need to remind them why humanity has never been conquered. Wolf's lips curled into a grim smile. Understood, sir. As the ship surged into the void, Winston's thoughts drifted to the message he would deliver to the VNAC. They saw humanity as prey, a species that had scraped by on luck and alliances. They had no idea the horrors Earth's history contained, the wars fought not for survival, but for power, for ideals, for revenge. The VNAC would learn that while humanity did not seek war, it had mastered the art of it in ways no other species had. And if the VNAC still wanted to fight after that, Winston would make sure they regretted it. Lieutenant Marcus Trasters, the tactical analyst, approached with a data pad. Sir, I've compiled the initial assessment of VNAC military capabilities. Their technology isn't significantly advanced compared to ours, but their numbers. He trailed off. Numbers don't win wars, Lieutenant, Winston replied, taking the pad. History has taught us that lesson countless times. Dr. Harrington joined them, his eyes gleaming with scholarly enthusiasm despite the gravity of the situation. Commander, I've prepared a comprehensive presentation of Earth's military evolution. From the earliest tribal conflicts to the development of nuclear weapons. The psychological impact alone should be significant. Winston nodded, studying the information before him. The VNAC's strength lay in their biological advantages, natural armor, superior strength, and aggressive instincts honed by millennia of evolution. But humanity had long since learned to overcome such advantages through innovation and strategy. Doctor, Winston said, make sure to emphasize our adaptability. The VNAC need to understand that every time humanity has faced a superior force, we've found a way to level the playing field. The historian nodded enthusiastically. Yes, sir. I've included detailed analyses of asymmetric warfare throughout our history. The VNAC may be predators, but they've never faced prey that learned to hunt back. As the Brave continued its journey through space, Winston organized his team for what would either be the most important diplomatic mission in human history or the prelude to an interstellar war. Either way, humanity would prove itself ready. In the ship's tactical room, holographic displays showed the known territory of the VNAC Dominion, a sprawling empire built through conquest and intimidation. Their society was structured around martial prowess, with status determined by battlefield victories. They were, in many ways, humanity's darkest reflection, what we might have become without the tempering influence of our hard-learned lessons about the true cost of war. The key, Winston told his assembled team, is making them understand that peace isn't our weakness, it's our choice. A choice made not from fear, but from wisdom earned in blood. The tension in the air was palpable as the Brave streaked through the stars, carrying with it the weight of Earth's defiance and the hope that history would be enough to stave off a war humanity could ill afford but was more than prepared to win. The first contact with the VNAC Dominion had set in motion events that would either secure humanity's place among the stars or plunge Earth into its greatest conflict yet. As Winston prepared for the confrontation ahead, he couldn't help but appreciate the irony. Humanity's violent past might be the very thing that prevented violence in its future. But if diplomacy failed, if the VNAC insisted on learning the hard way, then they would discover why every species that had ever underestimated humanity had lived to regret it, or hadn't lived at all. The Council Chamber. The Galactic Council Station loomed before the UE Brave, a marvel of engineering that stretched for kilometers across the void. Its crystalline spires caught the light of nearby stars, creating an ethereal display that belied the station's true purpose as the seat of interstellar diplomacy and power. Commander Winston stood at the observation deck, watching as the automated docking systems guided their ship into one of the massive hangars. Behind him, Dr. Harrington was making final adjustments to his historical presentation while Major Wolf coordinated with security. Fascinating architecture, Harrington mused, momentarily distracted from his work. Did you know it was designed to incorporate elements from all member species? A symbol of unity in diversity. Let's hope that symbolism holds true today, Winston replied, his eyes fixed on the approaching docking bay. Through the view screen, he could see other vessels already stationed, including the imposing black hull of a VNAC warship, its surface studded with weapon ports and sensor arrays. The docking procedure completed with a gentle shudder through the ship's frame. Winston turned to his team, his expression grave. Remember, we're not here to apologize for our existence or beg for acceptance. We're here to make them understand exactly what challenging humanity means. The delegation made their way through the ship's corridors to the main airlock. Their footsteps echoed against the metal deck plates, a rhythmic counterpoint to the soft hum of the ship's systems. As they approached the airlock, Lieutenant Traster spoke up. "Sir, preliminary scans show at least 30 VNAC warriors in their delegation. That's 3 times the diplomatic standard." Winston nodded, unsurprised. "They're trying to intimidate us. Let them. It'll make our point all the more effective when they realize why we don't need to rely on such displays." The airlock cycled open with a hiss of equalizing pressure, revealing the cavernous interior of the Council Station's diplomatic reception area. The space was deliberately designed to awe visitors, with soaring ceilings and walls decorated with holographic displays showing the history of galactic cooperation. A delegation of Council representatives waited to greet them, led by Ambassador HFY, a tall, ethereal being whose translucent skin seemed to pulse with internal light. The Meridians were known for their role as mediators, their natural empathic abilities making them ideal diplomats. "Commander Winston," HFY said, their voice a melodious whisper that somehow carried clearly across the space. "The Council welcomes Earth's representatives. These are difficult times." "Thank you, Ambassador," Winston replied with a formal bow. "We appreciate the Council's willingness to mediate this situation." Before HFY could respond, a deep growl echoed through the chamber. General Kerr strode forward, flanked by his warriors. The VNAC delegation was an intimidating sight. Each warrior stood at least 7 feet tall, their boneplate armor gleaming under the station's lights. "Mediation?" Kerr sneered, his massive frame towering over the assembled diplomats. "There is nothing to mediate. This is merely a formality before we claim what is ours by right of strength." Winston stepped forward, maintaining eye contact with the VNAC general. Despite the significant height difference, he showed no sign of intimidation. "You seem very certain of that, General. I wonder, has anyone ever told you the story of David and Goliath?" Kerr's red eyes narrowed. "Your primitive myths do not interest me, human." "They should," Winston replied calmly. "Because they're not myths. They're lessons, written in blood and remembered through millennia. Lessons about the danger of underestimating a seemingly weaker opponent." Ambassador HFY raised their hands in a peaceful gesture. "Perhaps we should move this discussion to the Council chamber. The full assembly awaits." The journey to the Council chamber was tense, with both delegations walking in formation through the station's grand corridors. The walls were lined with artifacts from various civilizations, peaceful achievements displayed alongside implements of war, a reminder that every species had known both creation and destruction. The Council chamber itself was a masterpiece of design, a vast circular amphitheater with rising tiers of seats surrounding a central presentation area. Representatives from hundreds of species filled the seats, their murmured conversations creating a low buzz that echoed through the space. As the Earth and VNAC delegations took their positions on opposite sides of the central platform, Winston couldn't help but notice the calculating looks from the assembled representatives. Many of them had dismissed humanity as an upstart species, barely worth notice in the grand scheme of galactic politics. Today would change that perception, one way or another. The Council's High Arbiter, a member of the ancient Xthran species, rose from their elevated position. Their crystalline form caught the light, sending rainbow refractions across the chamber. "We are gathered to address the dispute between the VNAC Dominion and Earth. The Dominion has challenged humanity's right to independent status within galactic society. They claim humanity lacks the strength to maintain its sovereignty. General Kerr stepped forward, his massive frame casting a shadow across the presentation area. The VNAC Dominion has expanded across 12 sectors, absorbing or eliminating all who stood in our path. We have conquered species far more advanced than these humans. Their technology is borrowed, their victories earned through alliance rather than strength. They are unworthy of the space they occupy. A murmur ran through the assembled representatives. Winston could see some nodding in agreement. The VNAC's philosophy of might makes right had its supporters among the more militant species. "If I may respond," Winston said, his voice clear and steady. The High Arbiter nodded, and Winston moved to the center of the chamber. "The VNAC Dominion measures strength by conquest alone," he began. "They see our diplomatic relations as weakness, our alliances as dependency. But they fail to understand a fundamental truth: humanity's greatest strength isn't in our weapons or our technology. It's in our history." Dr. Harrington activated the holographic system, and above the chamber, images began to form. Ancient battlefields materialized in the air, showing the evolution of human warfare from Bronze Age conflicts to modern combat. "We are not strangers to war," Winston continued. "Every piece of territory we hold, every advancement we've made, was earned through struggle. But unlike the VNAC, we've learned from our conflicts. We've evolved beyond the simple equation of might equals right." Kerr laughed, the sound echoing through the chamber. "Pretty pictures and clever words. Show us real strength, human. Show us your warrior's spirit." Winston smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Careful what you wish for, General. Because if you force this confrontation, you'll learn why humanity's enemies have always made the same crucial mistake: they assume that because we prefer peace, we've forgotten how to wage war." The tension in the chamber was palpable as Winston continued his presentation. Through holographic displays and historical records, he began to reveal the full scope of humanity's martial history, a story that would shake the VNAC's confidence and force them to reconsider their challenge. But as Winston spoke, he could see in Kerr's eyes that the VNAC general was not yet convinced. The real test was still to come, and humanity would need every lesson learned through its bloody history to survive what lay ahead. The council chamber fell silent as Winston prepared to delve deeper into Earth's military history. The next few hours would determine whether humanity's past would help secure its future, or if the galaxy was about to witness firsthand why challenging Earth was a deadly mistake. Lessons in blood. The holographic display above the council chamber shifted, casting the entire room in a crimson glow. Dr. Harrington stepped forward, his scholarly demeanor belying the gravity of what he was about to present. "Let us begin," he said, "with the birth of organized warfare." The air filled with images of ancient battlefields. Armies of bronze-clad warriors clashed on dusty plains, their weapons primitive but their tactics sophisticated. The council chamber watched in silence as the story of human conflict unfolded before them. "The Battle of Kadesh," Harrington narrated, 1274 BCE. The first recorded military battle with details of both forces' tactics and formations. Ramesses II of Egypt faced the Hittite Empire in what would become a masterclass in adaptation and counterintelligence. General Kerr snorted dismissively. "Primitive skirmishes with primitive weapons." Winston stepped forward. "Notice, General, how the smaller Egyptian force used deception and tactical superiority to counter the Hittites' numerical advantage. A lesson humanity would learn and relearn throughout our history: the strongest force doesn't always prevail." The hologram shifted again, showing the rise and fall of empires. Alexander's phalanxes swept across Asia. Roman legions marched beneath their eagles. Mongol horsemen thundered across the steppes. Each empire, Winston continued, taught us something new about the nature of warfare. The Greeks showed us the power of discipline and unity. The Romans demonstrated the importance of logistics and engineering. The Mongols proved that mobility and adaptability could overcome any defense. A VNAC warrior stepped forward, his voice thick with contempt. Yet each of these empires fell. Their strength was temporary, their victories meaningless. That's precisely the point, Dr. Harrington replied. We learned not just from victory, but from defeat. Each fallen empire added to our understanding of why power alone is never enough. The display changed again, showing more recent conflicts. World War I trenches stretched across the landscape, a testament to the human capacity for both endurance and tragedy. The council chamber grew eerily quiet as scenes from World War II played out, massive armies clashing across continents, cities reduced to rubble, and finally, the mushroom clouds that changed warfare forever. By the mid-20th century, Winston explained, we had developed weapons capable of destroying entire cities. We stood at the brink of our own extinction and looked into the abyss. But instead of falling in, we learned perhaps the most important lesson of all, the true cost of unlimited warfare. General Kerr's expression had changed subtly. The dismissive sneer was gone, replaced by something closer to uncertainty. You developed weapons of mass destruction, then feared to use them? This proves our point about your weakness. No, Winston countered. It proves our wisdom. We developed the power to destroy our world several times over, then chose to step back from that precipice. Not out of fear, but because we understood something your species has yet to learn. True strength lies not in the ability to destroy, but in the choice not to. The holographic display shifted again, showing modern military operations. Special forces teams conducting precise strikes. Cyber warfare units protecting critical infrastructure. Orbital defense platforms guarding Earth's approaches. We didn't abandon our martial capabilities, Winston explained. We refined them. Every lesson learned in blood over thousands of years has been preserved and improved upon. We train not just for strength, but for precision. Not just for victory, but for survival. Dr. Harrington stepped forward again, activating a new sequence of images. Let me show you something interesting, General. Throughout our history, whenever humanity has faced a technologically or numerically superior force, we've developed countermeasures. The English longbow against armored knights. Guerrilla warfare against colonial powers. Asymmetric tactics against conventional armies. The VNAC delegation stirred uncomfortably as the implications became clear. Their own reliance on overwhelming force suddenly seemed less advantageous. But perhaps the most relevant lesson, Winston continued, comes from our most recent conflicts. In the age of nuclear weapons, we learned that the greatest victories often come without firing a shot. We developed the doctrine of mutually assured destruction, the understanding that some conflicts are too costly for either side to initiate. The High Arbiter's crystalline form shimmered with interest. You suggest that the threat of violence became more powerful than violence itself? Exactly, Winston nodded. We learned to use the threat of force as a shield, not a sword. The VNAC see this as weakness, but it's actually the height of military evolution, achieving objectives without unnecessary destruction. General Kerr had been silent for several minutes, his red eyes fixed on the displaying images. When he finally spoke, his voice was different, less confident, more contemplative. These weapons, these tactics, you've spent your entire history finding ways to kill things stronger than yourselves. Now you're beginning to understand, Winston said quietly. Humanity doesn't seek conflict, but we've spent millennia perfecting the art of winning them. Every time we've faced extinction, we've emerged stronger, smarter, and more capable. The holographic display showed one final sequence, Earth's first contact with alien life, the formation of its space fleet, and the development of its defensive capabilities. We came to the stars hoping for peace, Winston concluded, but we came prepared for war. Not because we want it, but because our history has taught us the price of unpreparedness. The VNAC Dominion sees us as prey because we don't match their physical capabilities. But they're making the same mistake our enemies have made throughout history, underestimating humanity's capacity for adaptation and survival. The council chamber erupted in murmurs as the presentation ended. Representatives from various species engaged in heated discussions, their previous dismissal of humanity replaced by something closer to wary respect. Dr. Harrington shut down the holographic system, but the images seemed to linger in the minds of all present. The VNAC delegation huddled together, their earlier bravado noticeably diminished. Major Wolf leaned closer to Winston. "Think they got the message, sir?" Winston watched as General Kerr engaged in intense discussion with his advisors. "They're starting to. But the real test is still to come. The VNAC won't abandon their warrior culture overnight, they'll want to prove themselves." "And if they do?" Wolf asked. "Then we'll give them one final lesson," Winston replied grimly. "A practical demonstration of everything we just showed them." The council chamber slowly emptied as representatives departed to consider the implications of humanity's presentation. But the tension in the air had changed. What had begun as a simple challenge to Earth's status had become something more, a moment of revelation that would reshape galactic politics forever. As Winston prepared for the next phase of the confrontation, he couldn't help but appreciate the irony. Humanity's history of violence, which had so often been viewed as a mark against their civilization, might just prove to be their salvation among the stars. The challenge. The council chamber had emptied save for the key players in this interstellar drama. General Kerr paced the presentation floor, his massive frame casting long shadows in the dimmed lighting. His warriors stood at attention, their boneplate armor clicking softly with each movement. Winston could see the conflict in the VNAC general's bearing. The presentation had shaken their certainty, but pride and tradition weren't so easily overcome. When Kerr finally spoke, his voice carried a new edge of respect tinged with frustration. "Impressive history, Commander," he growled. "But history is past. The present demands more than clever presentations and ancient victories." Dr. Harrington stepped forward, adjusting his glasses. "If you've learned anything from our presentation, General, it should be that humanity's past is never truly past. Each lesson, each innovation, each victory and defeat, they're all part of our current capability." Kerr's red eyes flashed. "Then prove it." He strode to the center of the chamber, his armor plates flexing with each movement. "The VNAC Dominion challenges humanity to trial by combat. Not with warships and armies, but champions. Your best warriors against ours." A murmur ran through the remaining council representatives. Trial by combat was an ancient tradition among the VNAC, rarely offered to species they considered inferior. It was both an honor and a deadly serious challenge. Winston maintained his calm demeanor, but his mind was racing through the implications. "And the terms?" "Simple," Kerr replied. "If your champions win, the VNAC Dominion will recognize Earth's sovereignty and establish formal diplomatic relations. If we win, Earth accepts protectorate status under VNAC authority." Major Wolf tensed beside Winston, his hand unconsciously moving toward his sidearm. "Sir, this is exactly the kind of direct confrontation they excel at. Their physical advantages are considerable," Winston finished, "but not decisive." He turned to Lieutenant Trasters. "Your analysis." The tactical officer consulted his data pad. VNAC warriors possess approximately 3 times human strength, natural armor capable of deflecting most conventional small arms, and enhanced regenerative capabilities. In straight physical combat. He trailed off, the implications clear. "Then we don't fight them straight," Winston said firmly. He turned back to Kerr. "We accept your challenge, with one condition: the combat must test all aspects of martial prowess, not just physical strength, but strategy, adaptability, and tactical thinking." Kerr's mandibles clicked in consideration. "Explain." "A series of challenges," Winston proposed. "Physical combat, yes, but also tactical scenarios, strategic problems, and combat engineering challenges. A true test of overall military capability." The VNAC general's eyes narrowed. "You seek to avoid direct confrontation." No, Winston countered. I seek to test true strength. Unless you believe a warrior's worth lies solely in their muscle mass. It was a calculated risk, challenging the Venak's warrior pride. For a moment, tension crackled through the chamber as Kerr's warriors shifted restlessly. Then the general threw back his head and laughed, a booming sound that echoed off the chamber walls. Clever, human. Very clever. You understand our pride and use it against us. A warrior's tactic. He slammed a massive fist against his chest plate. We accept your terms. 3 challenges: physical combat, tactical warfare, and battlefield engineering. 2 days to prepare. Choose your champions wisely, Commander. As the Venak delegation filed out of the chamber, Wolf turned to Winston. Sir, what exactly is our play here? The same strategy humanity has always used when faced with superior force, Winston replied. We adapt, we innovate, and we change the rules of engagement. The next 48 hours aboard the UE Brave were a flurry of activity. Dr. Harrington and Lieutenant Trasters pored over historical records, analyzing every instance of humanity overcoming superior opponents. Major Wolf worked with the ship's combat specialists, developing unconventional tactics that might work against Venak physiology. Winston spent hours in the ship's holoprojection room, studying recordings of Venak combat techniques. Their strength and natural armor made them formidable, but also predictable. They relied on overwhelming force because it had always worked for them. They're like the knights of medieval Europe, he mused to Harrington during one session. Nearly invincible in their element, but vulnerable to changing circumstances. The historian nodded enthusiastically. Yes. And like the knights, they've developed blind spots. Their very advantages have become limitations, they've never needed to develop alternatives to brute force. For the physical combat challenge, they selected Major Wolf. Though not the strongest human warrior available, his background in mixed martial arts and specialized combat training made him adaptable and unpredictable. Lieutenant Trasters would handle the tactical challenge. His brilliant analytical mind and extensive study of historical battles made him the perfect choice for outthinking their opponents. For the engineering challenge, they chose Chief Engineer Sarah Chen, whose innovative approach to problem-solving had saved the Brave more than once during its diplomatic missions. The night before the challenges were to begin, Winston gathered his team in the ship's briefing room. The atmosphere was tense but focused. Tomorrow, he began, we show the Venak why humanity has survived every threat we've ever faced. Not because we're stronger, faster, or tougher than our opponents. But because we never stop adapting, never stop learning, and never accept the limitations others try to place on us. Wolf cracked his knuckles nervously. The physical combat's going to be rough, sir. Their champion could literally tear me in half. Then don't let them grab you, Winston replied. You've studied their movement patterns. They're strong but predictable. Use that. Trasters looked up from his tactical simulations. The scenarios they've chosen for the tactical challenge are based on actual Venak military victories. They're expecting us to approach them the same way their previous opponents did. Then surprise them, Winston said. Show them why studying history matters. Every battle they've won is a lesson in what not to do. Chen had spent the day modifying standard engineering tools into something more suitable for combat applications. Their engineering challenge will probably involve brute force solutions. They won't expect finesse. Exactly, Winston nodded. Remember, we're not just fighting for Earth's independence. We're teaching them why humanity deserves its place among the stars. As the briefing concluded, Winston received word that the Venak delegation had arrived at the neutral station where the challenges would take place. The massive structure, originally designed for trade negotiations, had been quickly modified to accommodate the trials. Standing at the Brave's viewport, Winston watched as shuttles ferried equipment and personnel to the station. Everything humanity had shown the Venak about their history, their capacity for warfare, and their ability to adapt would be put to the test. "Commander," Wolf said, joining him at the viewport. "What if we lose?" Winston turned to his officer, his expression resolute. "We won't. Because we understand something the VNAC don't, every fight is won or lost before the first blow is struck. They're still thinking about strength versus weakness. We're thinking about how to redefine the entire contest." As the station grew larger in the viewport, Winston felt the weight of history on his shoulders. Tomorrow would determine not just Earth's fate, but how humanity would be viewed by the galactic community for generations to come. The VNAC were about to learn that challenging humanity meant facing not just their current capabilities, but the accumulated knowledge and experience of countless conflicts across millennia. It was time to put theory into practice, to show that humanity's greatest strength wasn't in their weapons or technology, but in their limitless capacity to adapt and overcome. The stage was set for a confrontation that would either establish humanity's place among the stars or see them reduced to vassals of an alien empire. But as Winston prepared for what lay ahead, he couldn't help but smile. The VNAC had no idea what they were about to face. Trial by combat. The neutral station's main arena had been transformed for the trials. Tiered seating surrounded a central platform that could be reconfigured for each challenge. Representatives from dozens of species filled the seats, drawn by the unprecedented nature of the contest. Commander Winston stood with his team in their preparation area, conducting final equipment checks. Major Wolf was warming up, his movements fluid and controlled despite the tension in the air. Lieutenant Trasters reviewed tactical simulations on his datapad while Chief Engineer Chen made last-minute adjustments to her tools. "Remember," Winston addressed them, "they expect us to fight like them. That's their weakness." The arena's main doors opened, revealing the VNAC delegation. Their champions were impressive specimens. The combat specialist stood nearly 8 feet tall, with enhanced muscle mass even by VNAC standards. Their tactical expert wore ceremonial armor adorned with battle trophies, while their engineer's cybernetic enhancements gleamed under the arena lights. General Kerr took his place in the observation box, his red eyes gleaming. "Let the trials begin." First challenge, physical combat. The arena floor transformed into a circular fighting ring. Major Wolf stepped forward, looking almost small compared to the VNAC warrior who faced him. The alien champion, introduced as war leader Grokmer, flexed his massive arms, bone plates shifting like living armor. "I will try not to kill you too quickly, small human," Grokmer rumbled. Wolf's response was a slight smile. "That's your first mistake." The signal was given, and Grokmer charged forward with devastating force. But Wolf wasn't there. He had already moved, his years of martial arts training evident in every fluid motion. The VNAC warrior's momentum carried him forward as Wolf circled, striking at joints and vulnerable points. "Stand and fight!" Grokmer roared, frustrated by his inability to land a solid blow. "Why?" Wolf replied, ducking another massive swing. "Because that's what you do." The fight continued, with Wolf systematically wearing down his larger opponent. Every failed attack by Grokmer was met with precise counterstrikes. The VNAC warrior's natural armor was strong, but the joints and connection points were vulnerable, just as Lieutenant Trasters' analysis had suggested. Finally, Wolf saw his opening. As Grokmer committed to another powerful but predictable attack, Wolf used the VNAC's own momentum against him, executing a perfect throw that slammed the massive warrior to the ground. Before Grokmer could recover, Wolf had him in a submission hold, targeting nerve clusters that were common to most bipedal species. The VNAC warrior struggled, then slapped the ground in submission. The human audience erupted in cheers while the VNAC delegation watched in stunned silence. "Impossible," Grokmer gasped as he stood. "Your strength was irrelevant," Wolf finished. "You kept fighting the battle you wanted, instead of the one that was actually happening." The second challenge was tactical warfare, conducted through advanced holographic simulations. Lieutenant Trasters faced the VNAC tactical expert, Warsage Crow, in a series of battle scenarios. The first simulation recreated one of the VNAC's greatest victories, the Battle of the Crimson Nebula, where they had crushed a technically superior opponent through overwhelming force. But when the simulation began, Trasters did something unexpected. Instead of meeting the VNAC fleet head-on as their historical opponents had, he scattered his forces into smaller, more mobile units. His ships used the nebula's radiation to mask their signatures, striking at supply lines and communication relays rather than engaging the main fleet. "What is this?" Crowl demanded. "Where is your battle line? Who said we needed one?" Trasters replied, as another VNAC supply convoy disappeared in a precisely calculated ambush. Through 3 different scenarios, Trasters demonstrated humanity's accumulated military wisdom. He used Fabian tactics from the Second Punic War, guerrilla warfare strategies from a dozen Earth conflicts, and modern network-centric warfare doctrine. Each time, the VNAC commander's superior forces found themselves outmaneuvered and defeated. The final challenge was combat engineering. Chief Engineer Chen faced Warbuilder Vurok in a test of battlefield adaptation. They were each given a disabled war machine and told to make it combat-ready using only available materials. The VNAC engineer immediately began reinforcing armor and weapons systems, following their doctrine of overwhelming force. Chen took a different approach, studying the machine's systems and making precise, targeted modifications. "Your repairs are insufficient," Vurok commented, watching Chen work. "The armor is still vulnerable." "The best armor," Chen replied, "is not getting hit in the first place." When the machines were activated for testing, the difference in approach became clear. Vurok's machine was heavily armored but slow and fuel inefficient. Chen had sacrificed some armor for enhanced mobility and had rewired the targeting systems to be more precise. In the performance tests, her machine consistently outperformed the VNAC design. As the final scores were tallied, the arena fell silent. Humanity had won all 3 challenges, not through superior strength or technology, but through adaptation and innovative thinking. General Kerr descended from his observation box, his expression unreadable. He approached Commander Winston, who stood with his successful team. "You have proven your point, Commander," Kerr said, his voice carrying across the silent arena. "We saw your history as a sign of weakness, but we failed to understand what it truly meant. Each conflict, each challenge, each victory and defeat, they all taught you something." Winston nodded. "That's humanity's true strength, General. Not our weapons or our technology, but our ability to learn, adapt, and overcome. We don't seek war, but we're ready for it because history has taught us the price of unpreparedness." Kerr straightened to his full height. "The VNAC Dominion acknowledges humanity's strength and withdraws its challenge. We offer not submission or domination, but alliance. There is much we could learn from each other." The arena erupted in applause as Winston and Kerr clasped arms in the warriors' greeting. The gathered representatives recognized they had witnessed not just a competition, but a transformative moment in galactic politics. Later, aboard the UE Brave, Winston stood with his team in the observation lounge, watching the station recede into the distance. "Hard to believe," Wolf said, still nursing some impressive bruises, "that we just changed the course of human history through 3 simple contests." "Nothing simple about it," Trasters corrected. "We won because we had thousands of years of human experience to draw upon. Every soldier, every strategist, every engineer who came before us contributed to today's victory." Chen nodded. "We showed them that true strength isn't about being the biggest or the strongest. It's about being able to adapt, to think differently, to find solutions others can't see." Winston smiled, watching the stars streak by as the Brave entered FTL. "We showed them something else too. We showed them why humanity's place in the galaxy isn't just about our current capabilities. It's about our potential, our endless capacity to learn, grow, and evolve." The ship's communication system chimed. It was a message from Earth Command, congratulating them on their success and noting that several other species had already reached out about establishing diplomatic relations. Humanity's position in the galactic community had been secured not through force of arms, but through the wisdom earned from their long, complex history. As Winston prepared his report, he reflected on the irony of their victory. The VNAC had challenged humanity because they saw them as weak, as prey. In doing so, they had forced humanity to demonstrate exactly why they were neither. The long bloody history that had sometimes made humans question their own nature had proven to be their greatest diplomatic asset. The stars stretched into infinity before them, holding both promise and challenge. But humanity would face whatever came next as they always had, ready to learn, ready to adapt, and ready to prove again and again why they had earned their place among the stars.